There comes a moment in life when celebration begins to feel unnecessary. Not because joy has vanished, but because something deeper has taken its place. A quiet shift happens inside you, one that turns noise into stillness and anticipation into reflection. You wake up on your birthday and feel nothing dramatic, no butterflies, no countdown, no need for attention. The calendar says the world should celebrate you, yet your soul whispers why? What changed? When did the day that once shimmered with meaning begin to feel like any other sunrise? As children, birthdays felt like proof that we existed. A day carved from time just for us, bright, loud and innocent. But somewhere along the path of growing up, that sparkle started to fade. Not because we stopped caring, but because we started protecting. Protection disguised as calm. Peace built from pieces of disappointment. It's not that we forget how to feel special. It's that somewhere between broken expectations and quiet realizations, we begin to redefine what special means. Maybe it's no longer about the number of people who remember. Maybe it's about how much of ourselves we remember. That's the quiet shift, when celebration moves inward, when being alive feels less like an event and more like a practice, when happiness stops demanding witnesses. But let's be honest, part of you still wonders why the day feels empty, why your chest tightens when the phone doesn't light up the way it used to, why you pretend it doesn't matter, and yet it does. Because deep down, you remember what it was like to be seen without asking. You remember the sweetness of being chosen by the moment, and now you find yourself in a paradox. You no longer want the noise, but silence feels too heavy. You crave simplicity, but the simplicity tastes like loneliness. It's not indifference, and it's transition, the heart quietly rearranging its relationship with recognition. So when you wake up and treat your birthday like a normal day, you're not being ungrateful. You're crossing an invisible threshold between needing to be celebrated and learning to simply exist. It's a sacred passage few ever name. Because it's easier to call it not caring than to admit the truth. You've evolved beyond needing proof that you matter, but a part of you still longs to be reminded. Indifference is rarely born from emptiness. More often, it's armor, polished by time, shaped by memory. People don't stop celebrating because they've outgrown joy. They stop because joy once betrayed them. Maybe they waited for someone who never showed up. Maybe they planned the perfect day and ended it in silence. Or maybe they realized that every candle carries the shadow of expectation, and expectation, when unmet, burns longer than the flame itself. The human mind learns patterns faster than it heals. When disappointment repeats itself enough times, the psyche adapts. It starts lowering the bar, not out of wisdom but out of survival. You begin to say, "I don't care." But the truth hiding beneath that phrase is softer. "I cared too much once." Psychologists call this emotional self-protection. It's the quiet art of lowering anticipation, so pain has less room to grow. You learn to celebrate others loudly and yourself quietly, because vulnerability feels safer when it's directed outward. Indifference becomes a ritual. You pretend you don't mind being forgotten. You joke that birthdays are for kids. You scroll through your messages pretending not to count them. And when someone finally remembers, you downplay the warmth rising in your chest, as if gratitude itself might expose the crack in your armor. But indifference, no matter how convincing, is never complete. It leaks in small ways, in the glance at the clock, in the subtle pause before replying "thank you," in the way your heart still listens for your name. Because pretending not to care is still a form of caring. It's just care dressed in restraint. The mind believes it's protecting you from disappointment, but in truth it's only postponing intimacy. Every wall you build to stay safe keeps the world a little further away. And so, the birthday becomes a mirror again, not of age, but of avoidance. It reflects not how old you've become, but how carefully you've learned to shield the places that still ache to be seen. This armor may look like strength, but it carries a quiet cost. For every time you say, "It's just another day," what you're really saying is, "I've learned to survive without celebration." And while survival is noble, it is not the same as being alive. The tragedy of emotional protection is that it works too well. It keeps pain away and with it wonder. It silences disappointment and mutes joy. Over time, the armor that once defended you becomes the cage that confines you. So the question isn't why some people stop celebrating. The question is, how long can a heart pretend not to need warmth before it forgets how to receive it? Birthdays are not really about time, they're about reflection. Each year, the same date quietly arrives, holding up a mirror not to your face, but to your consciousness. You think it's just another day, but your subconscious treats it differently. It begins taking inventory. Who are you now? What changed? What didn't? Whose presence grew faint? Which parts of you survived another circle around the sun? This is why birthdays feel heavier as we grow older. They awaken temporal self-awareness, the mind's ability to look at itself through time. And sometimes that gaze is uncomfortable, because beneath the surface of routine, there are truths you rarely visit, dreams that dimmed, versions of yourself you quietly outgrew, promises you still haven't kept. The birthday becomes a checkpoint, a spiritual audit of alignment. It's less about age and more about integrity, how close you are to the person you once said you'd become. For some, that reflection brings pride. For others, it brings restlessness. And for most, it brings both in a strange duality of gratitude and grief. You tell yourself it's just a day, but your body remembers the meaning your mind forgot. That familiar mix of nostalgia and unease is your psyche holding a mirror to your evolution. Every candle lit is an invitation to face yourself, to ask quietly, am I living honestly? But self-honesty can be brutal. That's why many people choose distraction instead. They blur the day into the rest of the week, avoid the mirror and call it maturity. It's not denial. It's emotional pacing, the heart's way of saying, let's not rush this reckoning. Yet the mirror remains. Even when ignored, it follows you in subtle ways, in the way your mind replays certain memories, in the tone of your inner voice that day, in the small ache when the world feels indifferent. The silent mirror doesn't ask for celebration. It asks for awareness. It doesn't care about gifts or candles. It only wants to know, did you live this year in alignment with your truth? And that question, if you let it, is more sacred than any song or wish. Because behind every just another day is a soul quietly measuring distance between who you were and who you're still becoming. So perhaps the discomfort you feel isn't sadness. It's recognition. Recognition that time isn't an enemy, but a teacher. That every birthday is not a countdown, but a reflection point, an echo of everything you've learned and unlearned. The mirror does not judge you. It simply shows what's already there. And if you look closely, beneath the fatigue and the restraint, you'll still see that child, the one who once believed in magic, waiting not to be celebrated, but to be acknowledged. There's a peculiar discomfort that comes with being seen. As children, we crave it. We run toward the spotlight, eager for eyes, laughter, and approval. But adulthood changes the equation. Attention, once intoxicating, begins to feel invasive. What once affirmed your existence now feels like exposure. Why? Because somewhere along the way, being seen started to mean being evaluated. Every compliment carried an expectation. Every celebration came with comparison. And the pure joy of attention was replaced by the pressure of performance. So you step back. You tell yourself you prefer the background now. You start declining plans, brushing off well-meaning gestures, and labeling your withdrawal as peace. But sometimes, peace is just avoidance, wearing calm like perfume. To be seen is to risk misunderstanding. To be celebrated is to surrender control. And the human mind, once burned by disappointment, will always choose control over vulnerability. That's why many people quietly dread their birthdays, not because they fear aging, but because the spotlight feels too bright. It forces them into visibility they no longer know how to hold. They smile politely, but inside their body tenses. They say, I don't like attention, but what they really mean is, I don't trust what attention brings anymore. The spotlight itself is not cruel. It only reveals what you've been hiding, the unhealed longing to be recognized without performance, the wish to be loved simply for existing, not for how gracefully you carry your composure. When people say, I'm not used to celebrating myself, what they mean is, I learned early that my joy made others uncomfortable. They learned to dim their light to make the room feel safer. And over the years, that dimming became identity. You stop waiting for applause. You start confusing humility with invisibility, and eventually even genuine recognition feels foreign, like light on skin that hasn't seen the sun in years. But no matter how far you step from the spotlight, a part of you still misses the warmth, because the desire to be seen is not vanity, it's biology. Every human being needs reflection to exist fully. Without it, the soul begins to echo in silence, questioning its own presence. So maybe the problem isn't the spotlight itself, but the story you tell about what it means. The world once taught you that attention equals danger, but in truth, attention is simply awareness, and awareness is love in its most conscious form. To step back into the light doesn't mean craving validation. It means remembering that visibility isn't a crime. That being seen, truly seen, can coexist with stillness and dignity. You don't have to perform for the light. You just have to stop hiding from it. Because somewhere beneath your restraint, the part of you that once ran toward the glow is still waiting, not for an audience, but for acceptance. It was never about indifference, it was always about integration. The quiet ones, the ones who downplay their own milestones, they're not avoiding joy, they're transforming it. For most of life, celebration is something you receive. People gather around you, bring gifts, offer words, but at some point, that outer current reverses. You begin to realize that no amount of noise can replace inner stillness. That being celebrated is pleasant, but being at peace with yourself is divine. This is the reversal, when joy stops depending on applause, when fulfillment no longer needs an audience, when your worth becomes something you feel, not something you prove. Yet the shift isn't clean. The ego resists it. It whispers, if no one notices, did it even matter? It clings to the old equations of recognition, value, and when the world doesn't respond, it panics. But your soul knows better. It understands that quiet validation is the only kind that endures. To the untrained eye, this reversal looks like detachment, but it's not detachment. It's transmutation. It's the psyche rearranging its source of light. It's a candle turning inward, illuminating the walls of its own being. You stop needing to be seen because you've started seeing yourself, not through the lens of performance, but through the truth of presence. And when that happens, everything softens. The pressure dissolves. The armor becomes unnecessary. The birthday becomes less of a date and more of a reminder that your existence is not an event, it's an evolution. Still, this doesn't mean you feel nothing. Even the most centered souls ache sometimes for acknowledgement, because evolution doesn't erase humanity, it refines it. Peace doesn't mean numbness, it means you can hold longing without letting it own you. You can crave connection without surrendering your self-worth to it. That's what the reversal teaches. You can be both content and curious, self-sufficient, and still open to warmth. You can live quietly without disappearing. True maturity isn't about outgrowing emotion. It's about holding it gently, not as a burden to suppress, but as proof that you're still alive. So maybe treating your birthday like a normal day isn't a rejection of life, but a conversation with it, a whispered truth. I no longer need the world to remind me that I exist, but I welcome it when it does. That is not detachment, that is balance. The sacred middle path between solitude and belonging, between noise and silence, between the self you show and the self that watches quietly behind your eyes. The reversal isn't the end of celebration, it's the beginning of awareness. What if celebration was never meant to be loud? What if it was meant to be sacred, a dialogue between you and your own existence? At some point, the meaning of joy changes form. It no longer needs to echo through rooms or shimmer under lights. It starts to breathe quietly inside you, measured not by how many people notice, but by how deeply you notice yourself. This is the inner celebration, the invisible ritual of presence. It happens when you take a slow walk alone and feel grateful for the silence, when you look at the sky and sense continuity instead of urgency, when your reflection no longer feels like a stranger. No balloons, no cameras, no noise, just awareness, the most sacred kind of applause. The kind that doesn't fade when the day ends. Psychologists call this self-concordance, when your values and your actions finally align. But long before psychology gave it a name, the soul already knew this state. Ancient mystics called it harmony. Monks called it equanimity. Children called it peace. To live in alignment is to celebrate without needing occasion. To wake up and recognize that meaning isn't something you chase, it's something you inhabit. Every breath becomes a quiet thank you. Every ordinary moment becomes a small candle lit in gratitude. That's why some souls stop seeking external celebration, not because they've grown cold, but because they've grown whole. They've realized that joy doesn't need permission, that meaning doesn't require witnesses. And yet, even those who've mastered this stillness carry a gentle tenderness inside them. Because enlightenment doesn't erase emotion, it simply transforms its language. It turns excitement into peace, and peace into awareness. It allows you to feel deeply without attachment. So when someone says they don't celebrate, listen carefully. Sometimes what they mean is, I already am celebrating, just differently. Their smile might be quiet, their joy subtle, but their gratitude runs deep. It's the kind of contentment that doesn't need to be performed, because it's rooted in truth. The inner celebration is not about ignoring the world, it's about finally joining it, fully awake. It's realizing that the act of being here, breathing, witnessing, is already the greatest miracle there is. Because maybe the real meaning of a birthday isn't another year passing. It's another chance to remember that you are still becoming. Somewhere inside you, the child who once counted the days until their birthday still waits. Not for gifts, not for a party, but for recognition. For that simple, sacred moment, when the world turned toward them and said, you matter. That echo never fades, it just grows quieter under layers of composure and responsibility. You can silence it with logic, bury it under wisdom, but it remains, soft, persistent, patient. Because that child isn't asking for attention. They're asking for connection. They just want to be remembered by the person you became. And maybe that's what every quiet birthday is really about. A reunion between who you were and who you are. A merging of innocence and awareness. A whisper across time that says, I see you. We made it. You don't need candles for that. You don't even need a reason. You just need presence, and the kind that feels like stillness yet hums with life underneath. Because somewhere along the path of becoming grown, we started equating noise with meaning. But life's most profound moments rarely announce themselves. They arrive gently, in the way sunlight lands on your skin, in the way your breath steadies after tears, in the way you forgive yourself for taking longer than expected. Maybe this is the full circle, the evolution from celebration to awareness, from wanting to be seen by others to seeing yourself with compassion. The kind of self-recognition that doesn't need witnesses. The kind that feels like home. You are still that child. You are also the guardian now. And every year when the same date quietly returns, you get to choose how to honor that duality. You can light a candle or not. You can share the day or keep it sacred. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you pause long enough to remember that existence itself is extraordinary. Because the truth is, you don't outgrow the need to be seen. You just learn to see yourself. And when you do, the whole world seems to glow a little softer. So if your birthday comes and feels like just another day, maybe that's not emptiness, maybe that's grace. The quiet miracle of realizing you don't need a single day to validate your worth. You've been living proof of it all along. And if this reflection found you at the right moment, perhaps it's a reminder you were meant to hear. Your existence is enough reason to celebrate. Every sunrise is an unspoken happy birthday from the universe. If this truth resonated with you, subscribe. Not for me, but for the part of you that still seeks light, still asks questions, still wants to remember. Because here, in this space, we don't chase meaning. We awaken it.